Grok 4. This is the latest artificial intelligence system, and let me be very, very clear. This is a moment where promise and peril are going to collide.
For nearly 2,000 years, a mysterious ancient book has existed in the shadows of religious history. A text filled with visions of the heavens, encounters with powerful celestial beings, warnings about the end of the world, and secrets about the origins of evil. It is known as the Book of Enoch. For generations, it remained one of the most controversial writings from the ancient world. Some communities preserved it as sacred scripture, while others pushed it aside, leaving it outside the Bibles most people know today. But the story of Enoch did not disappear. Hidden inside ancient manuscripts, forgotten libraries, and desert caves, the book continued waiting for someone to ask a simple question. What exactly was written inside these pages, and why did this ancient text survive when so many others were lost forever? Recently, researchers turned to a completely new kind of investigator: artificial intelligence. They placed the Book of Enoch under analysis by Grok, the AI system created by Elon Musk's company, XAI, to examine the text from a different perspective. Not as a religious believer, not as a skeptic, but as a machine trained to identify patterns, connections, and structures hidden inside thousands of years of human writing. The results were unexpected. Instead of producing just another summary, the AI highlighted unusual connections between Enoch and other ancient traditions, revealed recurring themes hidden across its chapters, and pointed toward historical questions that scholars have debated for centuries. It raised a fascinating possibility. Maybe the Book of Enoch was not simply a forgotten religious story. Maybe it was a missing piece of a much larger ancient puzzle. Before we uncover the secrets hidden inside this mysterious manuscript, make sure to subscribe to our channel and help us reach our goal of 2,000 subscribers. If you're new here, stay with us. We explore ancient texts, lost civilizations, forgotten discoveries, and the questions that most people never stop to investigate. The book nobody was supposed to read. For centuries, the Book of Enoch existed in a strange place between history and mystery. It was not completely forgotten, but it was never fully accepted either. While other ancient writings became part of the Bible, Enoch took a different path. It survived in fragments, hidden manuscripts, and distant traditions, carrying stories that many people never even knew existed. So, what exactly is the Book of Enoch, and why did it disappear from most Bibles? Also known as First Enoch, this ancient Jewish religious work is traditionally attributed to Enoch, the great-grandfather of Noah, a figure briefly mentioned in the book of Genesis. According to Genesis, Enoch lived before the Great Flood and was described as someone who walked with God. But the Bible gives only a few lines about him. The Book of Enoch tells a much larger story. Scholars generally place the writing of different sections somewhere between 300 and 100 BCE, during a period when ancient Jewish communities were producing many religious texts while trying to understand questions about angels, evil, judgment, and humanity's place in the universe. But some researchers believe parts of the tradition behind Enoch may reach even further back, carrying ideas that developed centuries earlier. The text follows Enoch through a series of extraordinary journeys beyond the human world. He is taken into the heavens, shown hidden parts of creation, introduced to powerful angelic beings, and given visions of the future. The book describes faithful angels who serve the divine order, but it also tells the story of the fallen watchers, heavenly beings who descend to earth and reveal forbidden knowledge to humanity. It explores the origin of corruption, the coming judgment of the world, the structure of the cosmos, and the final defeat of evil. For modern readers, it almost feels like a missing chapter from the ancient world, a document that connects mythology, theology, and early ideas about the universe. But despite its influence, the Book of Enoch eventually disappeared from most Western Bibles. By the time early Christian communities were deciding which writings would become part of the official biblical canon, Enoch was left outside. The exact reasons are still debated. Some scholars suggest its detailed descriptions of angels, cosmic beings, and heavenly mysteries made it too difficult to fit into developing religious traditions. Others believe its exclusion was simply part of a much larger process, where different communities made different decisions about which texts carried authority. For more than 1,000 years, the complete version of Enoch was practically unknown in the Western world. But while Europe forgot it, another tradition kept it alive. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserved the complete Book of Enoch as part of its official scripture, written in the ancient Ge'ez language. And this is where the story takes another surprising turn. For centuries, European scholars knew rumors of a mysterious Ethiopian manuscript tradition containing lost biblical-era writings. Then, in 1773, Scottish explorer James Bruce returned from Ethiopia carrying copies of the complete Book of Enoch. A text that had been missing from Western knowledge for generations had suddenly returned. And when scholars began studying it again, they realized something important. This was not just an obscure ancient story. The Book of Enoch had already influenced some of the most important religious writings in history. The New Testament book of Jude directly quotes from Enoch, showing that the text was known and respected by at least some early Jewish and Christian communities. Many scholars also believe Enoch's ideas about angels, judgment, and a coming heavenly figure influenced the broader religious environment in which the New Testament was written. In other words, the book that disappeared from most Bibles may have played a much bigger role in shaping early religious thought than many people realize. And that raises one of history's most fascinating questions. Why was this book left out? Was it considered too mysterious? Too controversial? Or did it contain ideas that no longer fit the religious systems that developed later? That unanswered question is exactly what made researchers turn to artificial intelligence. The goal was not to prove or disprove the supernatural claims inside Enoch. Instead, it was to examine the text from a completely different angle, removing centuries of arguments and asking a simple question: what patterns appear when a machine studies this ancient writing purely as a work of language and history? The AI chosen for this experiment was Grok, developed by XAI, the artificial intelligence company launched by Elon Musk. Released in late 2023, Grok was designed as a conversational AI system capable of analyzing information, answering complex questions, and identifying relationships between ideas across large amounts of text. Unlike traditional academic research, which can require years of studying manuscripts, translations, and scholarly debates, AI tools allow ordinary readers to explore complicated ancient texts by simply asking questions. Someone can ask, why does Enoch mention certain angels? How does its creation story compare with other ancient traditions? Why do scholars connect it with the Dead Sea Scrolls? And what themes repeat throughout its chapters? When researchers and readers began exploring Enoch through AI analysis, the results were not a new discovery of hidden facts. Instead, Grok highlighted something different. It revealed patterns that scholars had been studying for decades, but presented them in a way that was easier for everyday people to understand. It identified repeated themes, connected similar ideas across different sections, and showed relationships between Enoch and other ancient traditions, from Mesopotamian mythology to the writings discovered near the Dead Sea. But it's important to understand what was actually happening. Grok was not proving that the events described in Enoch happened. It was not confirming angels, giants, or supernatural events. It was doing what language models are designed to do, analyzing words, structures, themes, and connections within existing information. Yet when the subject is a text nearly 2,000 years old, filled with mysterious visions and forgotten traditions, those patterns become incredibly fascinating. because sometimes the most interesting discoveries are not hidden objects buried underground. Sometimes they are hidden connections buried inside the words people left behind. The Watchers and the Nephilim, the story that changed ancient history. When Grok began analyzing the Book of Enoch, one section immediately stood out. A story so strange, so detailed, and so different from anything found in most Bibles that it became one of the most fascinating parts of the entire text. It was the Book of the Watchers, covering chapters 1 through 36. This is where Enoch introduces a mysterious group of heavenly beings known as the Watchers. Their original purpose was simple. They were sent to observe humanity. But according to Enoch, something went terribly wrong. Instead of remaining in the heavens, these beings chose to descend to earth. They crossed a boundary they were never supposed to cross. They took human wives and produced offspring known as the Nephilim. And this wasn't just a small side story buried inside the book. It was the foundation of Enoch's entire explanation for how corruption entered the world. When Grok examined this section, it highlighted something important. The story was not created out of nowhere. It directly expands one of the strangest and shortest passages in the book of Genesis. In Genesis 6, just before the story of Noah's flood, the Bible briefly mentions that the sons of God saw human women, took wives, and produced giants known as the Nephilim. But Genesis leaves the story almost completely unexplained. Who were these sons of God? Why did they come to earth? How did giants appear? And what happened to them afterward? The Book of Enoch attempts to answer all of those questions. It transforms a few mysterious verses into an entire cosmic drama. According to Enoch, the Watchers were led by a figure named Samyaza, and they were not alone. The text describes around 200 Watchers who descended together on Mount Hermon, a mountain located near the modern borders of Syria and Lebanon. Unlike Genesis, Enoch doesn't leave these beings anonymous. It gives them names. Figures such as Azael, Armaros, Barakel, Kokabel, and Zachiel are described as individual members of this fallen group, each connected with specific actions and teachings. One Watcher receives particular attention: Azael. According to Enoch, Azael taught humans how to create weapons, including swords, shields, and armor. In other words, he introduced the knowledge of warfare. But the text also claims he taught humanity other forbidden skills, including the use of jewelry, cosmetics, and decorative arts. Enoch presents these teachings as dangerous because they encouraged pride, violence, and moral corruption. Eventually, divine judgment falls upon Azael. The text describes him being bound, removed from humanity, and imprisoned in darkness while waiting for final punishment. And this is where Grok identified another fascinating connection. It linked Azael's story with the mysterious figure of Azazel mentioned in Leviticus 16. In the ancient Jewish scapegoat ritual, one goat was sent into the wilderness for Azazel. For many readers, that name appears without explanation. But Enoch provides a much more developed picture of Azazel as a fallen spiritual figure connected with corruption and forbidden knowledge. Whether the two traditions directly come from the same source remains debated among scholars, but the connection reveals how ancient ideas evolved and transformed across different texts. This is where AI analysis becomes interesting. The value wasn't that Grok discovered a completely unknown fact. Scholars have studied these connections for decades. The difference was that AI could place multiple traditions side by side, showing relationships that would normally require years of reading different translations, commentaries, and academic studies. It created a bridge between complicated scholarship and everyday readers. But the Watchers' story doesn't end with the fallen angels. Their descendants, the Nephilim, become an even bigger mystery. In Enoch, These beings are described as enormous and destructive. They consume everything humanity produces. Eventually, their hunger turns against humanity itself. The text says they begin fighting among themselves, creating chaos across the earth. But Enoch introduces another unusual idea. When the physical bodies of the Nephilim are destroyed, their spirits remain. According to the text, these spirits become the evil forces that continue influencing humanity. In other words, Enoch provides one of the earliest explanations for the origin of demons. This is a major theological idea. The Bible mentions the Nephilim, but it never clearly explains what happened to them or where evil spirits came from. Enoch attempts to fill that gap. Grok's analysis also highlighted that the idea of powerful beings crossing the boundary between heaven and earth appears far beyond ancient Israel. Similar patterns appear throughout ancient mythology. The Greek Titans, Sumerian divine figures, and certain Egyptian traditions all contain stories about powerful beings connected with humanity, forbidden knowledge, or rebellion against higher powers. Of course, this does not prove that these beings existed. What it reveals is something different. Across civilizations separated by geography and time, humans repeatedly created stories about the same fears. What happens when knowledge comes too quickly? What happens when powerful beings interfere with humanity? And what happens when boundaries that should never be crossed are broken? From an anthropological perspective, that pattern itself is fascinating. Because the Book of Enoch may not simply be a story about angels and giants, it may represent one civilization's attempt to explain why the world contains violence, suffering, and evil. The fallen angel roster and the astronomy that shouldn't be this precise. Another detail that surprised many readers was that Enoch doesn't just describe fallen angels, it creates a complete roster. Unlike many ancient myths where supernatural beings remain vague, Enoch gives names, roles, and responsibilities. Beyond Samyaza, the text describes numerous watchers who descended to earth together. Each one represents a different type of forbidden knowledge. Some teach humans metalworking, others teach astrology, enchantments, writing, and the hidden secrets of the natural world. But while the fallen angels are one of the most dramatic parts of Enoch, another section reveals something completely different. A section focused not on angels, but on the movement of the heavens. Chapters 72 through 82, known as the Book of the Luminaries, are considered among the oldest sections of Enoch. Fragments of this material were discovered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, dating back to approximately the 2nd century BCE. Instead of focusing on visions and supernatural events, this section describes the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. It presents a detailed calendar system based on a 364-day solar year. The year is divided into 4 seasons, each containing 91 days. This was different from the lunar-based calendars used by many later Jewish communities. Interestingly, the same type of calendar appears in other Dead Sea Scrolls discovered near Qumran, leading some scholars to suggest that the community responsible for preserving these texts may have followed a similar tradition. Grok highlighted this as one of the most intriguing aspects of Enoch. Because although the astronomy is not identical to modern scientific understanding, it demonstrates something remarkable. Ancient observers were carefully studying the sky. They were tracking patterns. They were recording movements. They were building systems to measure time. The text describes the sun moving through different gates in the eastern and western horizons throughout the year. At first glance, it sounds symbolic, but it reflects a real astronomical observation. The position where the sun rises and sets changes gradually throughout the year because of Earth's changing relationship with the sun. Ancient civilizations depended on understanding these movements. Agriculture, religious festivals, navigation, and daily life all relied on the ability to track the heavens. So this section of Enoch is not simply mythology. It represents an ancient attempt to create a systematic explanation of how the universe operates. A record written by people who spent generations watching the sky and trying to understand their place within it. And that may be one of the most fascinating discoveries hidden inside the Book of Enoch. A text famous for angels and giants also contains one of humanity's earliest attempts to organize the cosmos itself. Visions, the Son of Man, and the mystery of why Enoch disappeared. After exploring fallen angels, forbidden knowledge, and the origins of evil, the Book of Enoch takes the reader into something even more dramatic. A vision of the future, a glimpse into the final chapters of human history. Hidden inside chapters 83 through 90 are what scholars call the dream visions, two powerful prophetic journeys where Enoch sees the past, present, and future of humanity unfold through symbolic images. The first vision is a terrifying warning. Enoch sees a world consumed by destruction, a vision of a catastrophic flood that wipes away humanity's corruption. For readers familiar with the story of Noah, the connection is immediately clear. But Enoch does not stop with the flood. The second vision becomes far more complex. Known as the animal apocalypse, it transforms the entire history of Israel into a massive symbolic story where humans appear as animals. Adam and Eve are represented as white bulls. The descendants of Israel appear as sheep. Their enemies become dangerous predators. Kings, nations, and conquerors are transformed into creatures moving across a symbolic landscape filled with horns, claws, and battles. It almost feels like an ancient storyboard of history, where entire civilizations are reduced to a world of animals fighting for survival. But when Grok analyzed this section, it highlighted something historians have debated for generations. The text appears to contain knowledge of historical events that happened long after the time Enoch supposedly lived. This connects to a concept historians call vaticinium ex eventu, a prophecy written after the events it describes, presented in the style of a prediction. In simple terms, the author writes about the past as if they are seeing the future. This does not mean the text was considered fake by ancient readers. Many ancient writings used this style to present historical events as part of a larger divine plan. But it does raise important questions. When was each section of Enoch actually written? Who were the people behind these writings? And how many generations of authors shaped the final version? Most scholars date the animal apocalypse to the Maccabean period in the 2nd century BCE, a time when Jewish communities were fighting against the Seleucid Empire. The symbolic battles described in the vision appear to closely match real struggles from that era, making this section one of the strongest clues researchers use when dating parts of